no matter who they are or where they live. Over the years, we have made incredible progress, with more girls now enrolled and completing school than ever before.
In my family, there's not a thing about girls and boys. We are all the same, and boys and girls are always equal, and we should have the same opportunities.
But progress has not always been equal, and girls are still left facing the worst forms of exclusion.
Child marriages is another challenge that we face in our school. Girls are married off early, they have children, and are forced to take care of their families. This means that they drop out of school.
If we are going to achieve true inclusion for all, we must ensure that we do not leave anyone behind. Around the world, girls' learning outcomes are improving faster compared to boys. However, new gender gaps are forming around digital literacy and STEM subject choices. Even in the most developed countries, girls are less likely to pursue STEM subjects at school and university. This is a result of having career counseling that is not gender responsive, textbooks that still contain gender stereotypes, and teachers who have not yet been trained to address their own attitudes to gender as well. Gender inequality in teacher recruitment, as well as a lack of women in key leadership positions, add to this by reinforcing stereotypes around gender roles. In many developing countries, millions of schools are not inclusive due to their poor infrastructure and unsafe learning environments. Adding to this, school-related gender-based violence remains a threat that leads to young girls dropping out of school.
There is no society in the world that has been able to develop in the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals without their girls being in school.
To truly achieve success, we must take an intersectional approach that considers not just gender, but race, ethnicity, disability, and poverty, and the ways in which these interact for different populations. With the right laws, policies, curricula, and more gender-sensitive teaching, countries can break through. In Malawi, multi-sector partnerships are also helping more young girls return to school after pregnancy.
Nitabwelesa sukulu nali nkisanga funerani nibweleso sukulu. Mkazameza sukulu mafuna nzasamalia mwana wanga ndi ugwire ntchito bank manager.
Achieving truly inclusive education for all cannot happen until unequal gender norms in society have been stamped out. Parents and communities must be invited to work with governments on finding solutions and to confront ongoing gender discrimination taking place around all of us every day.
त्यामुळे माझी शिकण्याची जिद्द हटली नाही आणि मी शिकणार. मग त्यांना पण माझी इच्छा होती की त्यांना पण असं म्हणजे सगळे घरामध्ये राहतात. मला पण इच्छा आहे की मी पण एक स्वतःचा रूम घेईल शिकून मोठी झाल्यावर.
Let's act now and make inclusive access to education available to all.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome on behalf of the GEM Report and Brookings Institution. My name is Christina Kwok, and I'm a fellow at the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution, and it's a pleasure co-hosting with the GEM Report our South Asia regional webinar on the findings from the 2020 GEM Report, marking 25 years of progress and roadblocks to gender equality in and through education. My role this morning is just to provide some housekeeping notes, and before I do so, or after I do so, we'll also introduce our great moderator for today's session. This webinar, for all of your awareness, is being recorded, and in order for us to be able to share this with you all afterwards, you'll notice in the bottom of your Zoom screen that we have both a chat feature and a Q&A. In the chat box, our team here will be providing you all with links to speaker bios, presentation resources, videos, etc. And if you have a question that you would like to ask the panelists or to our presenter later this afternoon or this morning, please feel free to type those into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be monitoring that closely. So I want to now introduce our wonderful moderator for today's session. His name is Ganga Gautam. He is an associate professor of English education and director of the Open and Distance Education Center at Tribhuvan University. And he's also the general secretary of the Teachers Education Society in Nepal. And most importantly, he is an Echidna Global Scholar from 2016. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Ganga, who will now take over the floor for the rest of this webinar. Ganga, over to you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Brookings. Thank you, UNESCO GEM report team, for giving me this opportunity to moderate such an important session. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the time zone. Thank you all for joining us in this event. So we would like to encourage as much interaction as possible from our audience in this event. So as Christina mentioned, please do pose your question in the Q&A box and Twitter throughout the event using the hashtag I'm the first girl. Because of the time, we might not be able to address all of your questions, but we will keep them and collect them, and then we will try to reply them later. Just to set the scene for this event, the year 2020 is a milestone moment for accelerating implementation of global commitments to gender equality. 25 years ago, the world committed to improving the rights of all girls and women, no matter who they are or where they live. And we did that through the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Despite the commitments made in Beijing to take strategic, bold action, girls are still the most likely to suffer extreme exclusion the world over. In 2018, for example, 130 million girls worldwide, they were out of school, and only 2 out of 3 girls were enrolled in secondary education. In the current scenario, in the fragile context of COVID-19 pandemic, we have to act now or we risk losing the gains that we have made over the past 20 years. So if we look at the report released on the occasion of the International Day of the Girl's Child, which is 11th of October, the 2020 gender report shows that 72 million more girls have enrolled in primary and secondary education since 1995 in Southern Asia alone. That has been the greatest progress for any region in the world. However, despite an increase across all levels of education, girls are still more likely to suffer exclusion from boys. There's also another side of it. While the emphasis tends to be on the effects of gender norms on girls, we also need to put the spotlight on the less recognized effects of gender norms on boys' schooling, particularly the boys at the secondary level and the boys from the families which are disadvantaged and poorest in the communities. So addressing the boys' disadvantage and disengagement in education is also an essential part of a response to the challenge of gender inequality in education and beyond. Just to give you a brief kind of anecdote of my own experience, why I am passionate in this girls' education space. As a pedagogue, as an academics, as a member of the community, I have seen discrimination against girls and women in communities. 2 of my sisters, they had to drop out from schools after their first menstruation. Though this was a long time ago, the situation hasn't changed much in many rural communities in Nepal as far as the menstruation taboos are concerned. Because of the efforts that we have made, girls have been brought to school, but still the retention and their graduation is a big issue. And if you look at the STEM subject, we have a few girls and few female students in higher education. And if you look at the graduation rate in high school, only a very few girls from rural public schools graduate high school. So that means we all need to act together collectively in order to address the disparity so that all genders can get equitable access to quality education. So during the next 60 minutes, we will hear from the representatives of the Ministry of Education and some girls' education change makers from the Brookings Institution Echidna Global Scholars Alumni Network that Christina mentioned earlier. And they are all united by a noble cause of collective ambition to achieve gender equality in and through education and tackle the unfinished business of the realization of girls' and women's right to education. So therefore, without any further ado, because of the time constraint, I'm not going to read their bio, which are on the chat box. The link to the speaker's bio is in the chat box. So therefore, I'll just take their name. So we have one speaker and some panelists. So before we go to the panelists, the second phase of this event, I would like to invite to make a brief presentation on the 2020 gender report from GEM Reports senior analyst Priya Joshi. So over to you, Priya, for your presentation.
Thank you, Ganga. I'm sharing my screen now. I hope everyone can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, yes,
yes?
Priya.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Christina, Lorena, and Brookings for co-hosting this webinar with us. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Ganga mentioned, I'm Priya Joshi. I'm a senior analyst with the GEM Report team. I'm very excited to be here with you today to present the key findings of our 2020 gender report and learn from all of the insightful panelists. This report looks at the progress in girls' education since the Beijing Declaration in 1995. You will see that we have experienced significant and substantial progress over the last 25 years, but we have also seen persistent issues and disadvantages and are also facing the unprecedented challenge today of COVID. The goal of this presentation is to be brief, and it is to provide a sense of girls' education priorities globally with regional contextualization to South Asia, and also with an eye to our future, which is the next generation. Since 1995, the global enrollment rate for girls has really increased from 73% to 89%. The biggest improvements were seen in South Asia. Tremendous progress was made in India, where in upper secondary education alone, 32 million girls are now enrolled compared to 8.5 million in 1995. Afghanistan saw the most dramatic increase in the region in primary school attendance. It went from 29% in 95 to 83% today. And globally, 3 times more women are enrolled in universities. And over this period, South Asia also achieved gender parity in tertiary education. This success is important to commend because we know that girls' education can break the intergenerational cycle of disadvantage. Educated mothers can help improve the education outcomes of their daughters. However, despite an increase across all levels of education, we know that girls are still the most likely to suffer from acute exclusion, and large gender disparities persist, particularly for those facing cross-cutting disadvantages, such as disability, poverty, and those living in rural areas. In Pakistan, for example, in this figure, you see that less than 25% of girls completed upper secondary, but hardly any of the poor rural women did. And a new exclusion concern that was not faced by women back in 1995 is that the gender gap is emergent in digital literacy skills. And this has really become a problem, and it will now hopefully be under the spotlight due to the distance learning needs under COVID. As was mentioned earlier, this gender report comes at an important time in our history. The Gender Equality Forum, which is planned for 2021, is tasked with developing a new text that could replace the Beijing Declaration and set the new agenda for gender equality. Its organizers have identified 6 so-called action coalitions on different themes to inform this new declaration. Education is designated as a cross-cutting theme to help achieve the targets of each coalition. We have formulated 6 recommendations that demonstrate education's relevance to each coalition. Firstly, for economic justice, we need to eliminate gender disparity in education access, participation, and completion. And even though we may be inching closer to gender parity, there are still fewer than 9 women enrolled for every 10 men in 4% of countries in primary, 9% in lower secondary, 15% in upper secondary, and 21% in tertiary. We also know that a significant number of boys do not complete secondary education around the world. In South Asia, it's clear that girls have come a really long way from being extremely far behind boys in 1990. However, we know that discrimination is alive and well, and it is at the root of the problems girls and women are facing in our region. We need to close gaps with measures to prevent early school leaving, especially through social assistance and school protection programs that target disadvantaged families whose daughters are most vulnerable to unequal gender norms that limit their possibility. We need to ensure balanced representation of girls and women in STEM fields if we want gender equality in the development and use of technology and innovation. The share of women in engineering or ICT in tertiary education is below 25% in at least 2/3 of countries. And the share of women in technical and vocational education in the region declined from 45% in 1995 to 29% in 2018, and it remains highly gender segregated by course. This is despite the fact that girls are doing at least as well as boys in mathematics and science in a majority of countries. And again, this discrepancy suggests both gender norms, but also the urgent need for teachers and counselors to offer gender-responsive career orientation to deconstruct false images of technology. We need programs like the ones in Nepal, where the National Center for Education Development has implemented a gender awareness module within the teachers' professional development program. We need to also remove the stereotypes and gender bias in pedagogy and learning materials to advance women's rights in our social norms. If we take a historical overview, we know that women are more visible in textbooks today. The share of girls and women in secondary school English language textbooks, text and images were 37% in Bangladesh, 24% in Punjab in Pakistan. Women were almost absent from textbooks in Afghanistan in 1990 and now are featured more. However, the problem remains, and this is not just a South Asian problem, that even when women are depicted, we are often shown in passive, dependent, and domestic roles. It is therefore necessary to develop gender-responsive teaching and learning materials through regular gender audits of these materials, inclusive processes in decision-making, and research and support by appropriately trained specialists. Furthermore, we need to make schools safe and free from gender-based violence. At school, violence is an obstacle to the achievement of universal secondary education. It perpetuates unequal gender power relations. Fighting it requires an inclusive school ethos, preparing teachers and head teachers to take a critical view of their attitudes and values, and engagement with the community, especially to improve reporting of and responses to incidents of violence. Sanitation facilities also need to be improved to strengthen feelings of privacy and safety. We also need, on a linked issue, to deliver comprehensive sexuality education at all levels. In South Asia, 30% of women aged 20 to 24 were married before the age of 18. And the poorest girls and those living in rural areas are, of course, the most affected. For example, in Bangladesh, 95% of the poorest rural women aged 20 to 49 in Rangpur were married by age 18, compared to 41% of the richest urban women in Sylhet. So governments need to commit to implementing comprehensive sexuality education that promotes bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. They need to be prepared to overcome two challenges. First, many people in communities hold erroneous beliefs about the appropriate content of education, which are often fueled and propagated by organized opposition. Second, there is a need to manage a complex system of financing, teacher education, content, assessment, monitoring, and evaluation, which requires concerted action and especially intersectoral collaboration between education and health authorities. And finally, when it comes to the issue of leadership, we need to ensure gender-balanced representation. Unbalanced representation in crucial decision-making bodies, such as for climate justice, is one of the obstacles to ensure relevant decisions are sustainable and fair. For an example, in the education sector, the teaching profession is overall characterized by feminization, except in some circumstances like Afghanistan. It is often linked to perceptions that teaching as a career best suits women. On the other hand, women are not in positions of power within education systems. In 48 middle and high income countries, women are 20 percentage points less likely to be head teacher than a teacher in lower secondary schools. So we need that gender equality in education management and leadership as they resonate with the call for feminist movements and leadership and feminist action for climate justice. Thank you very much for your attention. Together with this report, we are running a campaign with the hashtag I am the first girl. We have been hearing the stories of girls who are the first in their family to graduate, some of whose stories appear in the report and others that appear in our blog series. We would really appreciate it if you go to our website, if any of our data and research are of interest to you, and if you want to engage with us more through both social media and in other means. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you very much for concisely summarizing the synopsis of the report, the findings, the issues, the areas where there are problems, and also a set of recommendations. So you have really touched a wide range of issues that we need to address through our collective efforts. So now let's kick off this evening's discussion with our panelists. We have three wonderful panelists, both working in the system, the Ministry of Education, and also in the non-state sector as a champion. So this is a very nice, group to talk with in this particular context. So our first panelist is Dr. Dibia Davari from the Ministry of Education in Nepal, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, and followed by Anil Paudel from NGO sector. And then finally, we have another panelist, Nasrin Siddiqui from Bangladesh, who has been working in STEM sector. So the first panelist is Dr. Dibia Davari from Ministry of Science and Technology in Nepal. Thank you, Dr. Davari, for joining us in this event today. We have seen that Nepal has made a tremendous progress in terms of providing access to quality education, especially in primary education. However, adolescent girls in high school and young women at the university sector, they are still subject to discriminatory social norms, and that remains inhibitors to change. As we have heard from Priya, one of the recommendations from gender report is that all curriculum and textbook must represent females in a way that does not perpetuate gender stereotypes. In many cases, text and images do not portray women in active social and economic positions, but in traditional stereotypical homebound roles. In case of Nepal, we have made materials more gender sensitive, and the Ministry of Education has taken this initiative by introducing guidance for gender responsive learning materials, and also allocating a gender expert to review the content, as well as gender audits and formal reviews of all the materials in every 5 years. That's a very good initiative of the Ministry of Education. So Dr. Davari, from you, we would like to hear that how you are going to train the teachers to use gender responsive teaching materials at the school level, because it is the teacher who will implement the vision that we develop at the center. So over to you, Dibya madam.
Thank you very much, Ganga sir. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And thank you very much for providing me with this opportunity to share my experience with you today. So yes, you are right. We can say that we've made our curriculum and textbook gender sensitive, and we have a guidelines. And also what we do is when we revise the curriculum and textbook in every 5 years or in the routine way, what do we do is after revising the curriculum, we ask gender specialists to review the curriculum from gender lens. That is how we do, we revise our curriculum and textbooks. And now we can say that our textbooks and our learning materials, our curriculum textbooks and learning materials are now, we can say now they don't have any gender stereotypical images or illustrations or whatever examples or the content. That is what we do have now. So this is what Nepal is doing, and as a result, and as you said, as a result, Nepal has made a significant progress in achieving gender equality in primary and secondary grades. That means it resulted in the increased enrollment rate, decreased repetition rate, and increased survival rate. This is a very good thing. And also we've done, as you said, we've revised our teacher professional development curriculum so that there is a content of gender equality. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, madam, we can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So as you said, we do have teacher professional development. We do have included the gender content in the teacher development curriculum. Now teachers are aware of gender issues. And your question concerning your question, it is the teacher who have to. It is a teacher who has to deliver the content in the classroom. That's right. And we can say that the teachers who are now teaching in government schools, they are now fully aware of the gender issue and the way to respond to the issue, and they are now able to able to deliver the content in the classroom. And in private schools, I should say that in private school it is challenging for them to, teachers do not know how to deliver the gender sensitive content in the classroom. In private schools we have to work on in private schools. This is our problem. And also, and do you have another question about COVID thing, how to respond to the COVID?
Yes, we do, because we have now closed all the schools because of this COVID-19, and the teaching learning situation was in halt for a while. And with the initiative of the Ministry of Education, the classes have now gone online. So this digital learning thing. So in your experience from the Ministry of Education side, how is this digital learning switch impacting girls in rural areas and the girls with disabilities, and what actions has the Ministry of Education undertaken to ensure that these girls from rural and remote areas also have access to this digital online teaching learning facilities? Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, to respond to the effect of this COVID pandemic, what we did in June this year is we just developed a guideline to respond to the. It is called guidelines for alternative learnings. That is to respond to the effect of COVID-19. And in that guidelines, we have categorized 5 groups of children. One group is those children who have access to online thing, digital thing, and everything. The other is who have access to mobile with apps, and the other group is who have the access, who has the access of access to TV, and the fourth group is the a group who has the access of radio only, and finally the last group is who does not have access to any of the material, the radio or television or the technology. And we aimed at these 5 groups because every child doesn't have access to online system or digital thing. So we developed the materials according to the need of the groups. That's how we try to respond to the need of these groups. And you are right that it is difficult for the children or girls with disability, because the needs of girls with disability is it varies from girls without disability. And if you see in terms of disability, inside the disability there are different types of disabilities and their needs are different, and we cannot use the same communication system to different groups of children. So it is being quite difficult for us, quite challenging for us to address the needs of those groups. But still, the government is trying to uh, develop the materials like audiobook, like materials like audiobooks and sign language things like that. But it's still challenging to respond to the needs of girls with severe intellectual disability. This is the problem, and also as you presented in the beginning of the program, that it is being very, very challenging for the government to address the interactions of various factors like, caste, ethnicity, and then class and geography and disabilities. intersection is very challenging, you know. It is very complex, and the government is trying to plan for the case for the children who have the intersectionality of the disadvantages. And for that, and as you know, Nepal is now trying to make a 10-year plan, and in that plan we are planning to address the group of children case by case, you know. The same for all, this does not work for them, so we are planning to do the case by case, you know. We are planning to address the needs of children, and we are planning to look at case by case approach.
Thank you.
To
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think you have done a commended job by revising the teacher education or teacher training curriculum, so that teachers become aware of the gender sensitive pedagogy, gender responsive pedagogy. And also you mentioned that you have customized the materials to reach to the girls who do not have easy access to the digital platform or online learning. So now I would like to move on to the next panelist, who is Mr. Anil Paudel. Anil ji, we know that the government actually hold the primary responsibility, as Dibia madam already mentioned, for ensuring the right to education for all the learners. Other actors, including non-governmental organizations, they can play a vital role in supporting these efforts made by the government. So can you please tell us a bit more about the challenges that persist for girls' access to education in Nepal, and the gaps in provision that the NGOs are feeling to improve access to education, including girls' access to technical and vocational education and training? Over to you, Anilji.
Thank you, Gangaji, for this question. I'm very glad to be a part of this event. The key focus of education policies in Nepal is improving access, quality, and equity. And many of us, we tend to understand enrollment as an access. But enrollment alone does not guarantee education or access to education. There are other important indicators such as attendance, retention, survival, and completion. So improved access therefore means improved enrollment, improved attendance, improved retention, and improved level of completion, improved rate of completion. And these days, there has been increased emphasis, not just to access to education, but access to quality education, which again is quite complex, confusing, because quality is, I think, is a very relative term, and then it's very contextual. Coming to the status of Nepal, when we look only at the statistics, the result seems to be very encouraging and satisfactory, because the net enrollment rate at primary level is more than 97%. It's reported by Ministry of Education, and then more than 70% in secondary education, secondary level of education. But this statistics conceals a lot of other issues, especially disparities at regional level, urban-rural disparities, gender disparities, and disparities between children from richer family and poorer families. Around 2 million children are estimated to be out of school. And out of the school-age children, of the total school-age children, around 15.5% of girls, they're out of schools, compared to around 13% of boys, which alone tells the gender situation in education. And around 20% of children do not attend school on regular basis, currently. And dropout is another big challenge in the context of Nepal. On an average, it is said that of the total children enrolled in grade 1, by the time they reach grade 10, almost 50% or even more than 50% are already out of school or out of education system. And that is the current status in Nepal. And why is this? The challenges that persist are at 3 different levels. There are 3 different factors. The first is socio-cultural norms and practices. The second one is economic or affordability factor. And the third one is administrative and institutional factors, factors related to institutions. So in terms of socio-cultural norms and practices that include early marriage and early childbearing, and girls are at higher risk to leave school because of these factors. And similarly, educational and career choices are stereotyped as male and female, like male subjects, female subjects. So there is lack of access, especially for girls in STEM education in Tibet sector. So this is because of this stereotype. Subjects are stereotyped. And Nepal, as everyone knows, being a son preference culture, so boys are prioritized in terms of resource allocation, especially in education, in educational investment. And parents see higher returns on investment when they have to invest, then they tend to invest for boys' education. And also the other factor is there is a restricted mobility for girls and daughters. And when they have to travel or when they have to leave home for education, it's very, very difficult for them. As parents, they're unwilling to send them away. And in terms of economic reasons, so as I already said, spending on education is still a luxury to many families who are struggling for survival. And especially for around 20% or more than 20% families who are living like below the poverty line. And despite free and compulsory education up to basic level, and especially for girls up to secondary level, there are like other indirect costs associated with education. And it's very difficult for parents to afford, many families. In many families, girls, they get less priority in educational investment, as I already said. And also there is a new form of discrimination. Parents, they prefer to send their sons to private schools that are supposed to be expensive and of higher quality, while they prefer to send their daughters to public schools, government schools, that are supposed to be, again, like free, but like the quality is questionable. And goals have to compromise when there are limitation in resources. As it's also one of the economic constraint challenges in Nepal. And so goals are also provided with less amount of time and lower quality of materials at home for their studies. And this also includes access to digital technology, which is more relevant in the present context of COVID-19, school closure, and digital learning. Besides, they also get less time for their studies at home because they have to work and they have to support their parents. And so other administrative and institutional factors are like distance from home to school, to and from a school, and school environment, which is not very welcoming for girls, and also not very safe. And also because we have a lot of plans and policies, but their effective implementation is a big question. And so the another is like underinvestment in education, especially in STEM and Tibet education. So talking about the gaps that NGOs are filling, because NGOs, they are supporting the government, especially in raising awareness about the importance of education, sensitizing people, and then also advocating. They're also advocating for a right-based approach to education. And also they are helping especially disadvantaged communities in affording education for the children, including gold scholarship and educational supplies, uniforms. And also they're supporting schools to improve their environment so that school becomes child-friendly, girl-friendly, welcoming, and safer place. And similarly, they're also helping schools to enhance the quality of education through teacher training by supporting educational materials, like providing resources, educational resources, and also through teacher training programs. And also they are providing vocational training and then skill development opportunities to the youths who are out of school or who like the dropout groups. So these are some of the key activities, programs that NGOs are doing of filling the gap that the government has still to do.
Thank you so much, Anilji, for highlighting further issues that the girls are facing in education and also highlighting the role of NGOs in filling those gaps. Now we have another panelist working in STEM sector, as I mentioned earlier, Nasreen Siddiqui. So Nasreen, we have heard from Priya's presentation that globally, 3 times more women are now enrolled in universities than 2 decades ago. And over this period, South Asia has also achieved gender parity in tertiary education in terms of enrollment. But gender norms in society have spilled over into subject choices. Anil also highlighted that earlier. And share of women in technical and vocational education in the region has declined over the past 25 years. So to address this trend, learning environments need to nurture and support female learners' participation and access to STEM education opportunities and ensure that they are able to complete their studies and embark on their careers in their chosen field later when they graduate. So, Nasreen, we would like to hear from you as a person or champion working in this space for the last so many years. We have heard the statistics from the report. Priya highlighted some of those things in her presentation, but you as a frontline worker in this space, can you tell us about how it feels to come across barriers to accessing an inclusive education and how will this be exacerbated by the global pandemic? Over to you, Nasreen.
Thank you, Ganga. Hello, everyone. Good day to you all. This is a very significant question, I have to say. That for inclusive schools or education, we know that all children should get equal opportunity to learn together, no matter their identity, difference, families, or ability. So I have to say that Bangladesh has shown many positive initiatives towards inclusion in education. But we need to work more for overcoming all remaining barriers. We know, and in our report and from our research, we came to know that we have different levels of barrier, like individual, institutional, societal, family level barrier. So we are working on it, and we were working, and we got tremendous progress. But unfortunately, due to this COVID-19 pandemic, this has caused a drastic effect in multiple sectors. Most affected are girls and young women, which are very common after any pandemic, and it's happening here as well. So we are directly working for the underprivileged community and young girls. So we found the real scenario like this, that many parents are married off their underage daughters. Many children are engaged with child labor, like thousands of girls are engaged as housemaid in Bangladesh. We don't have any exact report, and they will never be able to come back to school again. This pandemic is simultaneously exposing structural inequalities from health to economy, security to social protection has increased, and actually increased the violence, domestic violence, care workload, health hazard, economic shock. We have to say that many people are doing migration from town to village, and unpaid work, early pregnancy, unemployment, these all are increasing due to this pandemic. So we are observing the significant difference among high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech schools. So we saw that teachers and district education officers and other education officers, they are going to students' house to convince parents to stop child marriage and to bring the students under online classes and on home assignments. They are trying, but still there is a huge lag. So we had observed in last month, we had observed on 11th October, International Day of Girl, what you had mentioned, Ganga, that the motto was that my voice, our equal future. But from the report of World Bank, we had observed that adolescent girls face social and cultural constraints that keep secondary education out of reach. In Bangladesh, only 52% of enrolled girls complete secondary school compared to 65% of boys. Both are showing the very low rate here. So while 9 in 10 girls in our survey believe that marriage can wait until a girl has completed secondary school, this does not happen in practice. Bangladesh has some of the highest rate of both child marriage and female secondary school dropout across South Asia and lower middle income countries. So if this is the situation, so then I think that we have to give 100% effort to bring them back to school. And 200% effort we have to give to stop further dropout after this pandemic. So we need launching awareness campaigns that encourage families to continue supporting education. If these girls even cannot come back to school, we have to keep the door open, like skill-based learning program and what Anil had mentioned, and he is the expert of that, the Tibet program. And also we can adjust some program that they can come and can take some courses or special initiatives we can take for them. They can sit for the public examination in future after 2-3 years. We have to ensure their learning will never stop and can get all possible opportunities in life. And we wish, still we wish that every child will come back to school once this pandemic is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Nasreen. Thank you very much. So let me go back to Anil just for a follow-up question. Business as usual will not suffice to achieve gender equality in and through education once and for all. You have rightly pointed that out. So if that is the case, what urgent message do you want to give to the ministries of education as we enter into the decade of action for gender equality? And what is the role of parents, communities, and youth in effecting this change? So can you please share your thoughts in about 2 minutes? Over to you, Anil.
Thank you. A very important question indeed. I think first and foremost, because Nepal has gone through this political transition and has become a federal country. So, there are now federalist states, and a lot of power has been delegated to the federal government at the provincial and local level. So the most important thing, I think, is to set up a clear and well-functioning structure and mechanism at a provincial and local level for educational service delivery. So I think this is very important. And besides, the second is to strengthen the structure, the capacity of the local government and local structure that are responsible for delivering educational services. And also for implementing educational programs. And another key issue is like how schools can make themselves welcoming, especially for girls. So because this is a key issue, a lot of schools, especially public schools, the environment is not so welcoming, not so girl friendly. So this has to be a priority. And so governments at all levels, they should have a clear plan, policies, and programs to support schools in doing so. And I think another very, very important component of issue is there should be a coordinated effort, and government has to take the lead role to make education more practical and relevant to the needs of people, with greater emphasis on improving life outcomes or improving return on investment, educational investments, and ensuring that females equally benefit from those outcomes and opportunities that education can bring. And together with that, also what we need is like increased emphasis and investment in education with special programs and provisioning to achieve gender equality in education by ensuring informed educational choices. We have to ensure that there are informed educational choices are available as per the need, interest, and capability of people, of especially girls, females, as well as boys, and that is especially at post-secondary level. So I think the government at least has to ensure all these, and the roles that you have mentioned about different stakeholders. For parents, I think parents need to act more responsibly. They have to become more responsible and accountable, and responsibly fulfill their roles and duties in educating their children. So, and they have to give equal priority and preference to girls, to their daughters in educational investments. And also they need to support girls, daughters, and they can do by allocating more time and resources for daughters, for their studies, for their education, and also they can contribute, they can help and contribute in improving the school environment in their communities. I think communities, the contribution could be like they also have to be responsible. They have to take the ownership of the educational institutions and programs at local level. And also they need to find and generate local resources to improve access to and quality of education. And also they need to closely monitor the program, the process and progress of educational targets of the country.
Thank you.
And on the part of youth, I would like to emphasize that youth, because they are like change makers, they can run awareness campaigns at different levels. They can work as peer educators, role models for other youth, especially for girls with girls. Okay. And also they can mobilize local resources especially to encourage girls to continue and complete education and replicate the best practices and develop innovative and creative programs, especially to encourage girls to continue education. And also together with NGOs and CBOs, they can also work as like watchdog to correct and improve the education system that the government brings.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a quick follow-up question for Nasreen. The gender report also shares that the share of females in engineering or ICT in tertiary education, that's below 25% in over 2/3 of countries. So how are you working with rural communities to expand girls' access to STEM opportunities? Your experience, maybe in less than 2 minutes.
Right. We will actually never allow Corona pandemic to wipe away all of our work and achievement, what we did. So as we are still alive, we are working continuously. So you know, our organization, our NGO, ECS Education and Cultural Society, is the pioneer organization promoting STEM education concept in Bangladesh. So we were limited with the urban schools, only the capital schools, but with the support of Brookings Institution, after completing my research, then we are spreading it in the rural community. So for the last 1 month, so what we are doing that we did policy dialogue with 30 school principal administrators and also the policy makers and other community leaders, local leaders, political leaders, all were there, and we did the policy dialogue to give them the message about importance of STEM and to include it in the curriculum. So, and afterwards, we did the training for 200 teachers of those school STEM teachers. So then afterwards, we have the plan in 2021 to organize a grand STEM summit for 1,000 rural girls of that area. So after that Gazipur district, we are very happy that U.S. Department of State, they have selected our organization to continue 2021-2022 project with the STEM, and we are now moving our work in all 8 divisions in Bangladesh. There we will be able to give training for 800 female teachers, STEM teachers, and more than 10,000 girls, university girls and school college girls, they will get the career counseling and other program under that program. And in 2022, US and Bangladesh is going to celebrate the 50th years anniversary of US-Bangladesh diplomatic ties or friendship. So my organization is going to organize this celebration through STEM. So I have to say that the path forward will not be so easy for girls. And this is a global pandemic, global issue, and global crisis of girls' education. So global solidarity is required to overcome all these challenges. So I have to say that if we all can rethink, reunite, and renew our commitment among education policy makers, education practitioners, civil society organizations, NGOs, UN agencies, development partners, private sector, if we all can work together, then nothing can resist us to move forward. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. So thank you, Dr. Davari and Anil and Nasreen, for sharing us with your experience and the kind of efforts that you have made to bring equality in education and bringing girls to education, including STEM. That was so wonderful to hear from all of you. Now we have a kind of Q&A session. I would like to request Priya also to join us for this Q&A session. Priya, yes, you are there.
I'm here, but my
good.
video needs to be enabled
Okay,
by
no
Lorena,
problem.
I think.
Okay,
Okay.
no problem. So I have some questions from the audience, and the first question is for Priya. So the question is, can you tell us more about the monitoring findings from the report and what it tells us about the progress towards gender equality over the past 25 years?
Thank you,
Ganga. Elaboration.
Yeah.
Briefly, yes. Okay.
No, thank you, Ganga. I think, given our time limits, I'm just going to give like a package answer to the whole thing. It's this question, I think, that when we look at the monitoring data at the sort of extreme, at the foundational end, what we find is that 3/4 of all children who will never go to school are girls still. And if you look at adult literacy, the gender gap in adult illiteracy, it remains constant. So 2/3 of the people who are illiterate remain girls. So that has not changed over the last 20 years. And then when you look at the top end, as we've been discussing, the ICT, STEM sort of fields, women are just not entering those fields. And then what we also have is, I think what is astounding, probably, and you'll see this in the report, that you have a conversation, there's an interesting statistic that in Silicon Valley, only 1% of applicants who applied for artificial intelligence or data science are women. What all of this means really is that gender is, whether we're talking about textbooks or facilities or exclusion of any other way, what we're saying is that it's basically a depiction of our social reality. And I think what we need to say, I just wanted to end by saying that it's very important that we keep pushing, because we know that progress is not linear. Gender, if you look at the World Values Survey, which assesses many different kinds of attitudes, if in 15 out of 31 countries, the sort of appreciation of women's rights has actually regressed in like 5 years. So we have to keep fighting, and we have to keep fighting hard. And from a global comparative perspective, I think an important thing to say is that it's very important to look at the experiences around the world. So when we look at sort of the early pregnancy issues that might be facing some of the rural parts of our countries, there are examples documented in Sierra Leone, in the United Kingdom, in our report that that can be drawn for inspiration. When you think about sort of gender norms in society, Promundo in Brazil has done a lot to sort of educate men and boys about how to do that, about how to like build gender equal relations. And I think overall, Dr. Davari talked about the difficulty of intersectionality. And I think it just means that, it's what we said in our inclusion report. We need a twin track approach. We need an approach where the system becomes more inclusive, and then we have to do the case by case, the targeting, because there are some things that, we have to do both at the same time, because we cannot afford to wait. And I think that is probably my response for the entirety of the questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think you are absolutely right. We can build on the strength that we have accomplished, and also we can be proactive in certain areas which are still untouched and virgin. So and that's the way we can address the issue in terms of holistic address. Now just quick, because of the time, I just have one question for Dr. Davari from the audience. Dr. Davari, you mentioned that you have trained the teachers, and they are aware of translating the vision into the classroom. So the question from the audience is, what is the kind of monitoring system to make sure that teachers are doing their job and the girls are getting the kind of treatment that they deserve for equality in their classroom? So please unmute and respond to the question. Dibia ma'am.
Thank you for the question. It is a very important question in the context of country restructuring into the different level of government. And you are right. Now, as Anil said, and Anil sir said earlier, that our local government, the education is the jurisdiction of the local government, and local government need capacity to implement the educational program, and it is the local government is also responsible for the monitoring, and they need some capacity. You are right, there is an issue of monitoring at the local level, and that's why we are thinking of this and we are aware of this issue, and I think the government will make some strategy to address the issue in the forthcoming 10-year plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can say, I can just say like this for now.
That's absolutely fine, madam, because you are absolutely right that the local governments are also very keen to take their role in managing education at the local level. So if we can capacitate them to strongly monitor the kind of initiative that you have started, I think that will help to sustain the initiative to institutionalize this gender responsive pedagogy in the classroom practice.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
you are absolutely right that we need to capacitate the local government. As
right.
Wilson said earlier, I agree with you.
Right. Thank you very much. So now we have heard from these four wonderful speakers, three panelists and Priya. And thank you, Priya, for giving us the kind of synopsis and the kind of data from across the globe, and also specific to South Asia, what has been done and what are the gaps, what we need to do more, as individual, as collective community of practice in this girls education space. And thank you, Dr. Davari and Anil and Nasreen, for being the champion in your own area, in your own space. And from the space that you could access, I think you have done a tremendous job. And Dibia Madam, I know her personally also. She's very active in the Ministry of Education network in supporting girls education in school and university level. And also Anil and Nasreen both are the champions in their respective areas, so that we can support these young girls to realize and find their own destiny. So from this event today, what I can see as a takeaway from this event is there is a call for action now, a call to widen our understanding of inclusive education to include all learners and foster the education system that embrace learner diversity of girls and boys, women and men as strength. Also, there is a call to empower adolescent girls and young women through education, a call to make public policies far more inclusive based on examples of effective policies currently in force. We have learned from Priya's presentation that there are wonderful case studies around the globe in different areas. Also, there is a call to share best practices and expertise on how we can defend the importance of education as an enabler for girls and women's rights. So in the year 2020, we stand at a crossroad. We need to harness the momentum and lessons learned over the past 25 years to support countries to build on their efforts towards a better education system based on the principles of equality and inclusion, where girls and boys, women and men have the same opportunities to achieve their full potential and support each other. So we all have a role to play in making this happen. And remember, an equal generation is an equal, remember, an equal generation is an educated generation. So with that takeaway note, I thank you all for your time and for joining us in this event. And with your support, the event has been successful. Thank you very much.